Welcome to the 1822 podcast, where R&B is alive, well, and thriving. And we're going to talk about that. So strap in and join us on this journey. 1822. What's going on, people? You are listening to the 1822 podcast, and this is episode 2. You're listening to myself, Detain. I've got Vinny Ryan with me today, and I've got JK, and we're going to be talking all things R&B.
Yes, people. What's going on? So I thought I'd kick things off by asking a question. First of all, have you both of you guys seen a movie called Brown Sugar?
No.
Yes, I have, but not for a long time.
No.
You've not seen it?
No.
Good film,
Ooh.
Really good film. But the reason I ask is because in that film, and for the listeners out there who haven't seen it, the premise is basically a guy and a girl fall in love, but what joins them in that love is their love for hip-hop music. And the girl, she works for a radio station, and every guest she has on there, she asks them the question, when did you fall in love with hip-hop? So I'm going to do the same thing for you guys, just to start conversation. And ask you, when did you fall in love with R&B? So I'll start with you, Vinny. When did you fall in love with R&B? Was there a moment? Do you have a memory? Tell us about that.
I think most of my memories come just as most musical memories will for people when you were younger, what you've been listening to, what your parents are driving at you, and what was in the charts at the time. I think I was lucky to grow up in the 90s and the sort of that early 2000s period where R&B had just become massive. It was in the charts. It was your pop music. So therefore, my dad had brought me up on all the soul music from the 70s and 80s. So I sort of had that and the reggae stuff. And then, as a sort of getting older, you're starting to get into artists that are chart in the charts at the time. So, obviously by the end of the 90s, you just R&B was all over the shop. So, Destiny's Child, TLC. And then, my dad was still playing the old soul music. So I don't know, I always went in with a sort of a soulful sort of take on what I loved about R&B. And I sort of went against hip hop a little bit sort of when I was sort of 13, 14, but then hip hop and R&B sort of just merged together. And that's what, I guess, the moment I fell in love with R&B and sort of that neo soul sound was, I think I was in sixth form, and somebody brought in an album by Music Soul Child. And I hadn't heard of Music Soul Child before. I'd never heard of Music Soul Child before. And I heard this music. I thought, this sounds like sort of hip hop music, but hang on, he's singing. He's sort of singing, because Music Soul Child has a sort of style about him. It's not a traditional soul singer, but at the same time, it's new, it's fresh, it's something that I could relate to. And I remember listening to that album, and then I started to investigate other artists like him. So that's how I got into like people like Maxwell and people like that. And then I say at the time you had
D'Angelo.
And then like Alicia Keys had just hit with her debut, and that was just everywhere. So even though you had all the pop music and the hip hop music, so like obviously Eminem was big around that time, but Alicia Keys, you could still have that in the charts. That's something I think we lack a bit now. We don't have R&B. God, I'm sounding like an old man already, actually. But but we don't have that sort of traditional sounding singer in songs anymore. Certainly, well, actually both male and female. And obviously we've seen over the last few months and obviously few weeks of how male R&B singers have struggled a little bit. You don't have a great singer anymore. That's why we keep harping back to Usher. And that's why we're all hyped about the new Beyonce album, but these are artists from 15, 20 years ago, but even more, so. But I just fell in love with R&B, just listening to soul music, that Music Soul Child album. And I just wanted to listen to new music.
It was called I Just Want to Sing.
That was the debut album. It was the second album that someone had brought in, because I remember it had this, just listen. It had this sort of like,
the red one.
That's it. I can remember that cover. Like, I think it was
you got the headphones on.
Yeah, a while ago, people, I don't know if you remember that thing on Facebook. People were put a album cover on Facebook that you don't have to say what the album is or why you like it. Just put that reminds you of an album that you love. And I remember putting that one on straight away, because that's like ingrained in my head. So, and then I got to see him at Shepherd's Bush A few,
Oh,
yeah.
really?
This is going
I've
back.
never seen Music Soul Child live. I'd love to see him. Was he good live?
He was good that time, but then I went to see him a couple of years later at Hammersmith. This is how old this is. Hammersmith Palais, which isn't even there anymore. That's where they used to
Where
have
your
yeah,
age now,
exactly.
mate.
That's where they used to have the school disco. He didn't come on till after midnight, and me and my mate we couldn't afford taxis at that time, so we had to go get the last tube. Never got to see him. I had to email the promoter. So that's my love and hate Music Soul Child relationship.
Oh man, for me, I remember probably in the same way as you mentioned, Vinny. I remember the very first song and the very first time that I heard R&B, and
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, it was due to a girl. And I was in school, and it was at one of those kind of like I think it was like an end of year. I don't want to say the word disco because that makes him sound so old, but like I guess that's what you'd probably call it in school. And most of the music was like probably like Backstreet Boys and all that sort of stuff. And then this one tune drops, and this girl that I had taken a liking to like just bolts onto the dance floor. You know them ones where you hear a song and you're like you know, if you're in a club or something and you're like, oh, like this is my jam, and you got to hit the dance floor. So she just bolts off, and so immediately I'm kind of like I need to pay more attention to this. Like, what is this? But it just hit me from the get go, and it was Usher's "You Make Me Wanna," and it's I guess maybe it's like the reason that I would still say Usher is my favorite artist of all time. But the moment I heard that, I was like, what the hell is this? Like, because the music that I had listened to prior to that was mostly pop, the kind of more soulful. I edged towards the more soulful side of pop in terms of like out and out pop artists who had more kind of soul about them, like a George Michael, for example. Where you could, there's a real soul to their voice and the style. But I didn't know that's what I was looking for as such. And then when I heard that Usher tune, I was like, nah, this is a madness. But obviously Usher had already been, but he'd already been, making a few tunes prior to that. So, and then it was, I think really not too long after that when 8701 came out, that was just like, solidified for me. And then it was non-stop just watching music channels and listen to the radio and just always listening out for those particular tracks, new tracks or whatever,
Yeah, no, definitely that 8701 album, quality, man. But for me, falling in love with R&B, I think it was kind of twofold for me. There's two distinct memories that kind of jump out to me. The first was I remember being in sort of like a family party in South London years ago, when I think I must have been in primary school at the time. And you know what it's like when you go to like your cousins' houses or whatever. All the adults are downstairs, all the little kids are upstairs messing around. So I was with all my cousins and that, older cousins at the time, and they played this song on cassette, giving away my age now. And they played this song out loud on the speakers, and I just heard this bass line and this sultry voice come through, and it was just "Mm, I'm just a bachelor," and I was just like, what the fuck is that? I was like, no, play that again, play that again. They played it for me, and I was just like, no, I love this. And I went back to primary school. Told my classmates, I was like, have you guys heard of this singer called Pony? The song's called Genuine. Didn't know it was the other way around, of course. But so that was the first memory of like real R&B and falling in love with the sound. And then the second, I think I need to check the dates, but it might have been a couple of years later or a year later or so. But when Brandy and Monica released The Boy's Mine, and I remember the girls in primary school going back to back. One would do Brandy's verse, one would do Monica's verse, and they'd go back and forth with each other. And I was just looking at it like, I love this music. I love this sound. So for me, those were two like really clear memories I still have for R&B.
Yeah, man, there's so much. Do you know what? There's random tunes as well. You know, like sometimes where you you might smell a smell or taste a taste, and it takes you back 15, 20 years, and you remember exactly where you were. There's some random tunes, I mean really random, that stand out to me, that when I hear it, I'm like, I remember exactly where I was when I heard that for the first time, and the second time, and the third time. And you know, one that really sticks out, and it's a bizarre choice. Anyone who's hearing me for the first time would be like, this guy don't know his R&B music. But was City High with Eve.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
The Caramel, the remix. There were two versions, but the remix with Eve that had the sample. What sample did it use? Was it Dre or Snoop or someone?
One of them. Yeah.
But I remember the first time I heard that, and I was living in flat in like Fulham Ways, and then I was like sat there with my cassette player waiting at night, waiting for that song to come back on. I sat there with the tape ready to go. And as soon as I heard it, I remember hitting record and play, got that on the go. Then I listened to it back, rewound it, obviously missed the first couple of seconds because that's what it was like back in the day when you couldn't actually just get the song that you wanted on demand. And I listened to that to death. And it really takes me back. I played it actually on a show recently. And yeah, it properly takes me back. Like, have you got any songs like that take you back to a certain place or a certain time? Or
Yeah, I do. Going back to what you said about Music Soul Child, actually, that song. So on the first album, I Just Want to Sing, he released a song called Just Friends.
Yeah.
And for those of us who remember MTV Bass, where they used to just play R&B and hip hop videos constantly on Sky. I forgot the number. I think it was like 530 or something.
Changed a few times because at one point it was in the 300s, then it was in the 500s.
Then it moved up.
Yeah. Big channel.
So they used to play this song called Just Friends, and I remember the video. He started off beatboxing, and then the beatbox like fluidly went into the beat of the song. I was like, this is sick. And that takes me back to like, I don't know, year 6 or whenever it was, no, probably like year 8 maybe. And I clearly remember just waiting for that video to come on. We didn't have no YouTube, couldn't like go and search for it. I had to just wait for it to come back and then just constantly listen to it at any chance I had. That's a clear memory of another song. But that also ushered in the sort of neo soul for me personally. So then I deep dived into like Maxwell, like you were saying, Vinny, Maxwell, D'Angelo, Groove Theory, and I did all my history on that. And then I fell in love with the neo soul side of things as well. So I've got this love for R&B and then this sort of offshoot, which is neo soul. And I was just like, yeah, this is me now. I'm home. This is all I want. I've got a lot of love for hip hop.
Set for life now.
That's it. Hip hop was cool. Always a big fan of Jay and Nas back then. But yeah, for R&B, that was definitely it for me.
Do you know what? I missed the boat on because the artists that you guys have spoken about, the Maxwells, D'Angelos in particular. By the time that I had heard R&B and got into R&B, it was, like you said, it was hard to like deep dive in the catalogs back then. It wasn't just like you could open up Spotify or internet browser and start to do some research. It wasn't so easy. And by the time I did get into R&B, I'd kind of missed that wave. So a lot of, the first Music Soul Child track that I heard was probably one of the lesser songs in the catalogue, but one that as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is a tune. And I loved the video as well, going back to the MTV Bass days, was Break You Off.
Oh, yeah. With the Roots.
Remember that one? Yeah, that's the one. And again, that was another song that really does take me back. When I heard that, I was like, this is amazing. But going into the back catalogue of all those artists is something that's only really occurred for me in the last like 10, maybe maximum 15 years. Because I completely missed the boat. Like, the 90s R&B, which is obviously arguably the most special era, was one that I had to go back and listen to. It makes me sound a lot younger than you guys, but it's not true. It's just a picture I'm trying to paint. But yeah,
I think for random songs, there's a song that really sticks in my head. It was in the 90s. I don't know if you remember it. It was by a guy called TQ, West Side. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
That tune just reminds me. You said about a
Yes.
time, like, because I remember I used to go to Ireland for like my 6 weeks of my holiday because I had a family over there, and that song would be played on like, because you only have like MTV on the channels over there, so that would be played all the time. I always remember TLC Creep as well. My dad would play that, so that sort of defines the sound of 90s R&B for me. But it weren't just songs as well. It was like radio shows, because when I was at university, I think DAB radios had only just sort of come out, and Choice FM up in London. I was in Southampton, so you couldn't get it on the normal radio. But the late night shows on Choice FM, Jenny Francis in particular, that was exactly. Also, her voice is the greatest voice on radio ever.
She had the best radio voice of all time, honestly.
If she did an audio book, I'd read that. No, she.
I think she's on like Magic FM now or something.
Yeah, I think she did like a stint.
Heart 106.2.
Yeah, Heart. Yeah. And another thing is, around that time, you used to have magazines that you could buy, music magazines. So I used to buy Blues and Soul magazine. So that would give me the recommendations for so many artists that I ended up liking, because that would just cover everything. Obviously, the magazine format has died a bit, which is a shame because there's nothing like. But yeah, when I saw it in print, they say check out an album. I'd go and check out an album. But yeah, it's not like today where you can go on Spotify's or whatever and just find an album instantly. You'd have to actually go to a shop. I remember buying Tony Braxton's Greatest Hits, copying it on my CD, then going back to HMV and saying, "Oh yeah, my mum already got me this CD. Can I swap it?" So I could swap out another album, just copy it on the CDs. Actually, you might have to edit that bit out. That's probably a crime.
You wait till we start talking about LimeWire.
Oh, geez.
I'm going to go to jail. I think if you say LimeWire 3 times in a row, you get
a virus.
I think you just die.
That killed many of my computers. That did.
I tell you one track that is a really random song, and I'm interested to see if you guys know. And I can't remember specifically the name of the artist. It's really annoying me. But there was this one tune that I loved, and it was called G Spot. Do you remember the artist? I want to say it's something Marshall or Marshall. Wayne Marshall, that's the one.
Yeah. When I hear, do
you remember that tune,
baby? Yeah, big.
That's
tune,
the one.
Man.
Yeah. Tunes like that, when I was like, I think it's also because of it's the type of, and actually, funny enough, earlier I mentioned that it was a girl who kind of sparked my interest in R&B. I spoke to that girl not so long ago. Shout out to Lauren, and we was talking about like old school days and stuff like that. And we were saying like, when you think about some of the tracks that were being played at these like school dances or whatever, when you like, especially the R&B ones, the lyrics in them at these like, ultimately kids parties, and the kids are like singing along and stuff like that, and it's absolutely mental.
There were so many songs like around at that time that if you listen back, I mean, my dad used to play LL Cool J Doing It, and I knew all the words to that song. It's only as I get older I'm like, I was saying what?
Yeah. And that's, and I guess that's kind of what I was saying about R&B, is it was like a type of music and, lyrics and themes, if you like, that you just didn't hear in other types of music. It wasn't present in pop. My dad kind of listened to, like Oasis and stuff like that. Is obviously you can never imagine like the Gallaghers singing about like getting down and dirty and stuff like that. No. So it wasn't really massively something I had been exposed to. So when I started to hear R&B music, I was like, yeah, this is a bit of me. I mean, it probably says something about me, but but it's a lifestyle, isn't it? R&B. You don't choose it; it chooses you.
R&B life chooses you, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, going back to what you were saying, Vinny, about the first album that you really sort of loved at the time. Were there any other albums that you sort of researched and loved at the time? Or what was the first album you bought, maybe with your own money?
First album I bought. Oh, cool. Do you know, I tried to think about this the other day because someone was having a conversation. I was like, I don't remember the first album I went and bought with my own money. It was probably a Jamiroquai album, actually. So that's coming off R&B a little bit, because I remember at the time
Good shout,
I was getting into that. And but in terms of R&B, actually, I do know what it was, but I'm not going to say. I don't want to say it. No, we can't say it. We can't say it. You have to bleep this out. I was joking about this before, but now I remember buying it. I can remember going and buying it in Woolworths in West Drayton. I can remember buying this.
Mate, Woolworths.
Yeah. Well, that's where I buy my CDs. I think it was with my own money. Actually, there was two. One's not so bad. It was Slicker Than Your Average by Craig David.
Yeah.
Virgin Megastore in Kingston. I queued with my mate Daryl when that came out. Queued for that. And the other one was Chocolate Factory.
That's a good album.
Good albums, to be fair.
Yeah, very good. I remember the first album that I bought, the first single that I bought, and the first R&B album that I bought, because the first album was not R&B. And the first album I ever bought was Spice Girls' first album. That was me.
What were the songs on that? The singles?
Like Wannabe was the first one. Okay. Trying to think now.
Yeah, you know them all. You know them all.
Two Become One. That's a big boy tune.
Some smashes. Yeah.
But yeah, and the first single I bought, I remember specifically. I think, as you said, I think it was a Virgin Megastore, or whatever they called them, in Kings Mall in Hammersmith. And I went in to get Eminem, Dr. Dre, Forgot About Dre. And I was a kid. I walked over, and the guy guy's obviously a man or whatever, and says to me, like, "You realize you've picked up the explicit version? Are you sure that's the one you want?" And I'm like, I don't even know what explicit means, but yeah, that's the one I want. Took it home and realized quite quickly what explicit meant. And the first R&B album I bought was 8701, silver CD. I still remember that very clearly. Ended up getting very scratched to death, to the point where it was unplayable. So thank God for
your money's worth then.
Yeah, trust me. But thank God for Spotify and whatnot. I mean, I could have just bought another one, but
True. But yeah, for me, my mum bought me Michael Jackson's Dangerous album. But they call him the king of pop. But for R&B wise, I would say it was Destiny's Child's Writing on the Wall in the same shop in Kings Mall in Hammersmith. But like an idiot, I didn't realize at the time. I went and bought the single. I think it was Say My Name, and I bought the album, not realizing the song would be on the album.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasted my money, but it was worth it in the end, because I loved that album. What a great album that was as well.
Did it have the lyrics at the back?
Yeah, it had the pamphlet that you take out, and it's got all the lyrics and the songs. I used to love reading that. I wanted to know who produced it, who wrote it, where it was recorded, the little messages. Loved all of that.
Yeah, I literally would sit there for hours with. I even remember the unit, because it was a unit that had the CD player at the top, it had the tape player at the bottom, and so on and so forth. I put these CDs in. And this is back, like, I remember like listening to the Now 40 somethings on all of them ones over and over again. And then when I got like the Usher album, and you listen to it through, and then you can read all the lyrics and literally learn every single song. And obviously I was gonna say like those were the days. I can't do that sort of thing anymore. But obviously now, I guess the Spotify's and stuff, they put the lyrics in there, but I don't know if it's just me or if it's an age thing, but I would imagine that's a relatively underused feature. Do you ever use that?
Never. I think it's just, it speaks to the time, I guess. Time where we are now with, busy lives. But back then, in the school days or just summer holidays or whatever, you just had a lot more time. I didn't really have the internet to keep me consumed with other stuff. So I would happily just spend hours putting on a CD and going through the lyrics. So maybe that's what it is. But yeah, I don't have time to do that now, but I'd love to.
Yeah, trust me. Every now and then, though, I do listen to like a more modern song, or even sometimes an older song where I'm like, I want to know what the lyrics actually are. You know, them ones where you sing the noise and you just be like, and then you like look into it and it's like, what? How's that the lyrics?
Yeah, and you find out years later that they're saying something completely different.
Yes. And yeah, I think actually one was Kevin Little. You remember Kevin Little?
Yeah, turning me on.
Turn me on, right?
On?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Turn Me On, I literally probably, I reckon like a month or 2 months ago, maybe actually heard what the lyrics in that were, in the sense that like I'd always sung along to that song, you know, Turn Me On. And there's the verses where I had no idea. I was just singing the noises. And actually, when I found out recently what the lyrics are, it's like he's saying something like, you know, about a girl backing up on him. She's got his python hollering for mercy. And I was like, what? I was a kid singing it.
He could have just been talking about his pet snake, though.
Well, could have been. I'm sure it was all very innocent, but yeah, when you actually look back at some of the lyrics of these kind of 90s, early noughties R&B tracks and subgenres, mate, kids singing these things. What would you do, right? If you had a kid, right, and they're under 10, boy or girl, doesn't matter, and you walk into their room and they're playing like an R&B tune or whatever, and it's one that you know, and you hear them singing the lyrics that are like bad lyrics, like, you know, like well inappropriate. Are you going to stop them and correct them and tell them, oh, they can't be saying that, or are you going to just nod, smile, let it slide? JK, what are you saying?
Oh, that's a tough one, man, because I know what it's like. It's so tough. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see until that time comes, man. I don't know. I'll be more inclined to just kind of nod and smile. But the missus might take that approach. I don't think.
I guess it depends on the artist as well, because if Vinny's got a kid and they're listening to his back catalogue of albums, it might be worth pulling them up.
I remember I was DJing a few years ago. It was a day party. I think it was a school. They were like probably 12, 13-year-olds. It was a girls' school. And they kept asking me for songs. And at the time, so this is going back a little while now, they wanted me to play Rihanna, S&M. And just where the DJ booth was situated, they're just on the dance floor singing the lyrics of this song. And I was like, I felt really uncomfortable. And then they came and asked me, it was some song, a request. They said, I know it was for, this girl said, can I have a song for little, whatever her name is, Susie? And they wanted me to play Flow Rider, Whistle. So they're on the dance floor and they're singing the lyrics of that song. Can you blow my whistle, baby, whistle, baby? And I was just like, I was looking at the other staff. I was like, well, there's nobody going to say anything. But when they asked for Soldier Boy, Crank That, that was the bit where I was like, hang on, what are we saying in this song? Because the lyrics of that song have been, yeah.
Absolutely.
Superman, that hoe and all that.
Thing is, the dance is so good and the song is so catchy. You don't really give a shit about what he's saying. You just indulge in the dance and the beat and everything else that's going on. But when you break it down, that song is actually filth.
And realistically, that song is dead. It's so dead. But do you know what? I listened to it so many times because I needed to perfect the dance for when I went to Oceana. I was in the R&B room. And
Kingston
if you don't know,
yeah,
them student night ones. and if you're in that room, because you want to be in that room, because that's where the best music was at. But you need to know the dances. Otherwise, you're that guy holding up the wall, as they say.
That is it.
All right, let's call it there. But what I want to do is I want to encourage our listeners, if you're listening to this podcast, to tell us yourself earliest memories of R&B. What made you fall in love with R&B? And just chuck us out a random song that really takes you back somewhere, as we have done with our Kevin Littles and Wayne Marshalls and whatnot. But yes, we've been 1822, and this is how we fell in love with R&B. Thank you for listening to the 1822 podcast. Make sure to subscribe on your listening platform and follow us across social media. at 1822music.